Okay, so I'm clearly fascinated by this because I've spoken about it before. So there's this paper published, or I should say not paper, but article published in December 13th, 2013. I think it was December 13th. I know it was 2013 in the Journal of Forensic Science, and it's called Psychopathy and the Cinema Factor Fiction. And in this article, these two psychiatrists, PhDs and MDs, actually psychiatrists slash psychologists, by the name of Samuel Lightstadt and Paul Lankowski, they show their findings where they watch 400 movies. As they described it, they went from Psycho to Pootie Tang. They watched Pootie Tang. That's funny to me. So anyway, in this movie, they tried to identify realistic psychopaths. And one thing they did is they excluded characters that had magical powers or were invincible or were supernatural. So you're not going to have a Freddy Krueger or a Jason Voorhees. I don't know if that includes Michael Myers, but They said realistic characters. Michael Myers has been shot several times. He's not a realistic character. But they were left with 126 films and with psychopaths. And 105 of the psychopaths were male and 21 were female. So something I should probably address now is I'm using the term psychopath in light of this research and findings done by these two psychiatrists slash psychologists. And that's actually not a diagnosis. That's a description. The actual diagnosis is antisocial personality disorder or dissocial personality disorder. And often the terms psychopath and sociopath get used interchangeably, but there are some differences there. I am not going to get big into that because I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But one element of of a sociopath versus a psychopath, not to get too much in the weeds, is basically how empathy is processed by each individual and the ability to essentially mask and perform in society. And generally speaking, psychopaths are better at masking and able to perform in society more effective than sociopaths. Psychopaths are more likely to be able to hold steady jobs, be superficially charming. Sociopaths tend to be a bit messier and, I guess, I'll use the term reckless. And I'm not going any further with that because anyone who's a professional healthcare or in healthcare or study of the brain is already seeing some problems. I hope I didn't do too bad of a job even giving into that. So what they seem to be focusing on are people who would maybe fall under the term psychopath, but I do have some issue with that. So anyway, of these movies, like I said, 105 of them were males, 21 of them are females. I actually mentioned this list in another video, and someone who made the list was Gordon Gekko, which he is a character from the two Wall Street movies played by Michael Douglas. And that's interesting because a disproportionate number of CEOs actually have signs or score fairly highly, at least have some, I guess you could say they would probably score highly on the antisocial personality disorder scale. So, excuse me. So some female psychopaths that they described, these are ones that were realistic, was the character, I think her name is Annie. I'm going this from the top of my head. I wasn't going to initially mention her, but they do mention, she does make the list. I think her character is Annie, the character played by Kathy Bates in Misery. Let's see here. I have a few of them written down. Let me see here. Let's see. You have I remember the character, but I can't remember the character's name. But from Single White Female, the roommate who moves in, I have it written down, but I can't read my handwriting very, very well. Oh man, that's great. Well, just to give the top three, so they had some honorable mentions, and that was one of them. I thought so. Gordon Gekko being an honorable mention, not being in the top five. I thought Gordon Gekko was kind of interesting. Another one I thought was actually interesting was Sergeant First Class William. Ooh, can't read that. Cannot remember. The character Jeremy Renner played in The Hurt Locker. I am not going to stop this video and go over this again. I'm just going to go with it. So, if you ever watched The Hurt Locker, the movie about the bomb or bomb disposal group in the Iraq War, the character played by Jeremy Renner, he actually has, and I don't know. I guess they're saying antisocial personality traits. So maybe they were focusing on that more than just like straight up psychopath. But there we go. He does fall under. He is kind of at the end, I'll kind of go through the list of the traits, and as I mentioned, these people think about him, because I would be kind of surprised to see that he made the list. But when you go through some of the basic traits, he actually does match it. And Alonzo Harris, Denzel Washington's character from Training Day, is on the list, which really shouldn't be totally surprising. But when we look at the list, or look at the list of characteristics, it'll be even more apparent. But the top three was the character of Henry, played by Michael. I don't have this written down. Michael Rooker. Michael Rooker, I think this is his name, from Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Hans Beckett from the movie M, that was made by Fritz Lang. I've never seen M before. I've seen Metropolis, his other movie, never seen M before. But I think Hans Beckett, I think he's a serial killer. And number one on the list, and I'll say that in a bit, but I'm going to save that one, because before I say who number one on the list is, which I'll probably give that away by the title of this video, but I will give some that are actually not realistic psychopaths by their determination. So they actually had a list of unrealistic psychopaths. The first one was Tommy Oud from Kiss of Death. I'm sorry. I think that's from 1947. I've never seen it before. And they have a great quote, and I think they're actually referring to him when they were talking about this. I thought it was a great quote. They say, the two psychologists, they have a kind of a comment: real psychopaths don't giggle. And I think they're referring to that Tommy Oud character from Kiss of Death, because I think he's the classic, laughing, kind of jokey psychopath, path, twirling the proverbial mustache. I don't know how the character looks. So I don't know if he has a mustache, but that they're saying no, that's not. If you observe psychopaths, that's not the way they appear. But so number one, as far as not realistic, number two is Norman Bates, and Norman Bates is actually psychotic, and not a psychopath. No, that's different. So kind of out of touch with reality, suffering from psychosis. So wrong condition. And then Hannibal Lecter. Well, their observation of psychopaths, most of the ones that they're encountering, they don't have this super intelligent, suave veneer about them. So that was kind of on their unrealistic list. Now, the reason that these guys made this, I think they did it for kind of a cool exercise, but I think the other reason they did it was because, or I don't think, but this is what they stated, is that it's actually hard to identify people with antisocial personality disorder, or to identify psychopaths and sociopaths. So they actually created this list for the purposes of for clinicians. So if you're working, if you are working as a psychologist or psychiatrist, if you're working in I guess forensics, kind of seeing these people in these movies and their behaviors to make it easier to identify them. So that was their stated reason for doing this, at least one of their reasons. So kind of identifying, or kind of pointing out that the character from Kiss of Death, and that Norman Bates and that Hannibal Lecter wouldn't be realistic depictions of psychopaths would be important, because guess what? I found another list that was actually created by law enforcement, where they identified their psychopaths and they went in the opposite direction. And I think theirs was largely based on their interpretation from, honestly, from pop culture. And I think that these members in law enforcement were probably just like, they were probably more so making a list of their favorite villains from movies than they were making a list of realistic psychopaths. Because, like, for example, the Joker was on top of their list. And I think that these psychiatrists, I keep wanting to call them psychiatrists, psychologists, because both of them have both medical degrees and also PhDs. So I keep going between the two of them. But I'll just say psychiatrists. I'll just try to remember to just call them psychiatrists. But these two psychiatrists are actually trying to move people away from that thinking. So number one on the list of realistic psychopaths was Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. And honestly, I think this is kind of interesting. Because they started out by saying that we wanted to have realistic characters that aren't basically boogeymen or supernatural. But honestly, in the movie, Anton Chigurh comes off as kind of an almost supernatural force. Now, this may seem a little an odd statement, but okay, so No Country for Old Men was directed by Joel and Ethan Coen. And one of their early movies was Raising Arizona, and in that they have a character named Leonard Smalls. And here's the thing. So Leonard Smalls he plays a bounty hunter who's played by the way, of Randall Tex Cobb. He plays a bounty hunter who is trying to find this baby and return it. He's not a good guy, by the way. He's a bounty hunter. Not saying that bounty hunters are inherently bad, but saying that he's trying to get the baby and return it to the parents. He's oddly enough not the good guy in the movie, but they're kind of similar characters. The difference is that, Raising Arizona is a comedy, and he's depicted like, he's almost depicted as being like this supernatural force from hell. He's just a man, but that's the way he's depicted in the movie because for somewhat comic value. But in a way, that's the way Anton Chigurh is in the movie No Country for Old Men. I read the book years ago, and there's really no description of how he looks exactly. I think they describe his accent as being nondescript, something like that. But the little things that they added to the character, the strange haircut, I don't know if they get into his mannerisms, the stunning, I don't know what you would call it, the bolt gun he uses. If you guys have never seen the movie, he uses firearms, but he likes to get right up on people, and he uses this pneumatic bolt gun that's used on cattle and presses against people's heads and pulls it, and, kills them by damaging the brain, the same way you do a cow. And that's something that's not in the novel No Country for Old Men. That's something they added to the movie, if I remember correctly. I could have looked at, but I'm pretty sure they added that to the movie. I read the book like 10 plus years ago. So the way he's presented, the thing about this character is I don't see Anton Chigurh existing in society. Like, I think from the very get-go, he would give you the heebie-jeebies. And in the movie, every time he interacts with people, there's kind of, I guess, the story takes place in Texas, so it's like, well, people are going to be nice because there is a thing about, being in the South and people being polite. But the guy's a weirdo. So that element of being kind of superficially charming or being able to kind of fit in, I don't really see that with Anton Chigurh. So here are the traits or the qualities, descriptions of antisocial personality disorder, and by extension, sociopathy. Try to read this. I may not go through the whole list, but behaviors that conflict with social norms, such as breaking laws. So when you look at, for example, Gordon Gekko, he's doing insider trading. Okay, so you don't have to necessarily be a killer, but you're going against, and has no problems doing that whatsoever. Disregarding the rights and feelings of others. So yeah, you have these characters who are murderers, and you have, like, once again, you have the I keep going back to Gordon Gekko because it's the example of a probably the I think anywhere, I think maybe 1% to 2% of people may be getting that number mixed up with something else. The percentage of people with antisocial personality disorder. I'm going to look that up actually. Okay, so apparently, according to this, and this is from the Cleveland Clinic, anywhere between 1% and 4% of adults are affected with antisocial personality disorder, the prevalence being about 2% to 4% of men and 0.5% to 1% of women. So chances are, you have several, so you have probably a couple of people with antisocial personality disorder in your life. You've definitely met someone with it. And I kind of wonder if the case with women is just ability to mask it a little better. So I'll continue with this. Difficulty feeling remorse or empathy. Okay. Let's see here. A tendency to lie, manipulate, or deceive. And I think one component of that with the manipulation, I think with women with antisocial personality, I think that would often take on more of a sexual component out of, I guess, not saying that, I think this is kind of, you realize that can be more useful to you if you're a woman in a lot of situations. But then again, men with antisocial personality disorder are often risk-taking when it comes to sexual behavior or sexually promiscuous, as opposed to another type of promiscuous. A general disregard for the safety of self or others. So going back to that character of the Jeremy Renner's character in the Hurt Locker, where he's taking these chances, he's risking his team and he's risking his own life. Now, I do have some kind of issue with the way he's presented in that movie because I don't know, that could be just a result of trauma and maybe the way PTSD is manifesting itself in that character. But I don't know. These are the psychiatrists, the psychiatrists / psychologists who watch these movies. That was their conclusion, that it's antisocial personality disorder. Avoidance of responsibility, aggressive and violent behavior, and difficulty planning ahead. So that whole risk-taking thing of saying, like, I will, maybe I shouldn't do this thing because there could be consequences, or the basic planning ahead. So what really inspired me to make this video was an episode, and maybe one of my favorite episodes of a old sci-fi, not super old sci-fi show from the early 2000s called Firefly. And this show only ran for one season, had 14 episodes. Let's see here. It ran from, September 20th to December 2002. Was canceled after one season with 14 episodes. And then it had a movie, and that was it. And one of the last episode of the show features this character called Jubal Early. And the character of Jubal Early, he is a bounty hunter played by Richard Brooks. I think Richard Brooks was in some episodes of Law and Order. I think not episodes of Law and Order, but I think he was he's probably best known for being in the original Law and Order, I believe. And this character, I remember watching this 20 years ago, maybe not long after this show went off was canceled. He is one of the most unsettling characters I've ever seen in a television show. And looking back at that, he is almost written to be a straight up psychopath. All of that list I went through, check. He has all of them, but on top of that, you can kind of see how he could come off as superficially charming. He's violent. He can turn it on and off. He's manipulative. And then what's interesting is that it's revealed, and this is an interesting thing, that they give just a little hint of his background, where one of the characters who's able to basically read him states that when he was a child, he enjoyed hurting animals. And in fact, he's a sadist, which goes against the thing that he keeps telling people. He's contradictory. He threatens one of the crew members with sexual violence, but then he says, well, I really don't want to hurt anyone, but I'll do this in order to achieve my objective. But then this other character later reveals that, no, when you were a kid, you hurt animals. You hurt the neighbor's pet and all these other things, which, by the way, if you look at a lot of serial killers, for example, I think I know for a fact. Oh man, I just went blank on his name. The Jeffrey Dahmer. There we go. Jeffrey Dahmer hurt small animals. Geen, I think, hurt small animals. Hurting animals is one of those things. I think is one of those signs as for children who have antisocial personality disorder. Well, the thing is, you can't be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder as a child, but one of those signs where it's like maybe you want to do an intervention on a child, but you can't be officially, to my understanding, diagnosed until you get past puberty, because basically all children are psychopaths. So basically, like hurting small animals, lying, bedwetting was one. So it's interesting because they explicitly say that this character is like, your mother loved you, but she knew there was something wrong with you even then. So this was a television show, so it would not have been viewed by these two doctors. But I would even propose that if they were to see that, I think that he may be, and I can't say this because I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, as I will say time and time again, but I wonder if he would be a better example of a psychopath than Anton Sugar. Because if you want to exclude an almost supernatural force and unbelievable character, which Anton Sugar kind of, which by the way, I love the character, but he's kind of, almost like a force of nature less than a human. I think that this character would be a better example, only on the screen for about maybe 30 minutes. And really, as far as that impulsive thing, there's actually the one act of violence that he commits, which isn't for a purpose. He does shoot someone in the show, not fatally, but he does it in a struggle, and it kind of, for his purposes, it makes sense. But the one bit of violence that he does that really isn't required is when one of the crew members, who is known for being able to kind of psychologically manipulate people, she tries to get in his head, and he immediately he smacks her. And this is, get out of my, basically like, don't do that with me. So I thought that was kind of also an interesting tidbit of it too, and just a generally unsettling character. But at the same time, I could see him being walking about the world and being able to manipulate people and come off as normal if needed, putting on kind of a human mask.